Hello YouTube, this is Frank from Happy Coder, and today in this video I would like to talk to you about what software should you be using as your Git client. And first off, I just want to start off by saying that as software programmers, especially JavaScript developers, we tend to be very geeky and very nerdy about our tooling. And when it comes to a graphical user interface for Git client, there's no difference. There are tons of very good products on the market. And for the most part, my personal preference when it comes to Git operation is always to use the command line interface, because I feel like using the basic command line interface to type in all the commands is not only a very good way to really familiarize yourself with the commands and how Git works. The other reason is that just like any software, there's always some trade-off or some pet peeves that you do not necessarily like about the GUI application, because at the end of the day, it's very subjective and very opinionated. However, when it comes to staging a lot of different files or cherry-picking commits, or most importantly, resolving merge conflicts, having a graphical user interface can drastically improve your workflow and just make your development task a lot more easier. So with that said, let's take a look at a few different GUI applications for Git clients. We'll be looking at Sublime Merge, which is developed by the same team who made Sublime Text, Git Kraken, Git Tower, Source Tree, and the GitHub desktop application, and Git Ahead. And after that, we'll be looking at two version control implementations that comes in with modern IDE installation, which include the version control that is built into Webstorm and the Git page that is embedded in Visual Studio Code. So with that said, let's get into today's content. So just to save you some time, the TLDR version of the summary of this video is that if you really do want to use a graphical user interface desktop client for Git operations, I would personally recommend Git Kraken. It has a very nice user interface and it's very pricey, and it has a lot of features that individual developers or developers working in a small team wouldn't necessarily need. However, if you do a horizontal comparison of all the desktop applications, Git Kraken is my personal favorite to work with. And if you do not want to necessarily pay for a standalone Git application, I think if you're an individual developer or part of a team that heavily relies on Visual Studio Code, the built-in Git panel of the Visual Studio Code application is very powerful. And if you combine that with the built-in terminal of Visual Studio Code, I think that can satisfy most of your Git needs and operations. So today we'll be using all these different desktop applications to look at one repository that I have, which is the React journaling app that I've been working on, which is a personal project. And the first application we'll be looking at is the Sublime Merge. Like I said, it's developed by the same team who made Sublime Text, which is a vastly powerful and popular text editor. And my personal opinion regarding this software is that it has a very intuitive graphical user interface. All of your branches are over here, and you can see how many remote repositories that it's connected to. Do you have any tags, which makes releasing different versions very intuitive and convenient. Stashes. In the main interface, you have your commits history and your files, and you have this very elegantly rendered graph showing you all the different commit branches and different heads. And on the right hand side, you have summary and the syntax highlighted area showing you essentially the information that you would get by running a git diff. What I like about this software is that the user interface is insanely intuitive. If you look at these little icons, you have pop and stash. And if you click on this thing, you can check out different branches. These are the push buttons, so you can pull or push to your remote. Let's use Vim to create a new file. You can see that if you click on this thing, which is your current working directory, you have a untracked file, which is the file that we have just created. And you can either stage this file, or imagine you have multiple different files that you want to add to the staging area. You can first click on this thing and click on it again to stage all of them to your staging area, which can be very convenient. Imagine you have a long list of new files that you have created, but you just want to stage a handful of them instead of all of them, which can be very difficult to do if you're just solely working with the command line interface. However, with this graphical user interface, it's much more convenient for you to do said operations. If you're just looking at these very simple operations, I would say that the official GitHub desktop application, that user interface is very unintuitive. It's very hard to work with. So for example, if you're just talking about adding this new file to the staging area, I can't even intuitively get an idea of how to do it. And do I just click on this thing and this doesn't do anything? So how do I add it to the staging area? If you look at other different softwares, this one is called Git Ahead, which is a free desktop application that functions as a Git client. This one is, I would say, better. The user interface in terms of intuitiveness is better than the official GitHub client. At least I have a sense of how to add files to the staging area. But I wouldn't personally recommend Git Ahead for developers because I don't think Git Ahead offers a very intuitive or very nice user experience when it comes to resolving conflicts. We'll be seeing that in just a minute. And let's look at how the staging area works in GitKraken, which is my personal favorite when it comes to GUI, desktop, Git clients. You can see that when it comes to the user interface design, GitKraken just wins hands down. Everything is very well designed, the graph is very beautifully represented, and you have all these very cool looking things that just makes you want to play with it. And the different Git profiles, they even design their own. I'm not sure if you can see this from a distance, but they designed their own custom icons for different GitKraken profiles in case you have different Git profiles that you want to all integrate into GitKraken. And the staging area is very intuitive. You have all of your unstaged files here. If you click on this thing, if you stage file, it moves it to the staging area, which is, I would say, one step further than what Sublime Merge is doing. Sublime Merge gets the job done in a very minimalistic, very simple fashion, but the graphical user interface of GitKraken is just so much cooler to look at and play with. So let's unstage it and look at how Git Tower implements the staging area. A lot of people say that Git Tower is very powerful, but personally, if I can be completely honest with you, I do not like their user interface. First of all, I don't understand why this TypeScript file is being rendered as this icon that indicates that it could potentially be played by VLC media player. And secondly, I don't think this graphical user interface is very intuitive. I'm not sure how I can potentially add this to the staging area. This is not telling me a lot about what's going on. So this means git add. If you compare this one to the minimalistic simplicity of Sublime Merge or the very insanely cool looking interface of GitKraken, I don't think this one can be recommended with good conscience. Now that we have unstaged this file, let's try to look at how file staging works in SourceTree, which is developed by Gitbucket and is also a free software, so it makes sense that they didn't put too much attention into designing the graphical user interface. When we open up the repository, you can see that compared to the cool looking graphs from GitKraken or the simplistic minimalistic graph of Sublime Merge, I'm sorry that I have to say that this just looks like a subway map, but it gets the job done, I guess. When you click on your working repository or of your working area, you can see that this file is currently unstaged. This moves to the staged area, which is very nice. It's somewhat intuitive. And one thing that I would like to direct your attention to is that because this software is developed by the Git bucket company, I guess, so occasionally you will see these things representing their own product, which is Git bucket, which doesn't really bother me. Again, this software is completely free, so I guess most people can tolerate the occasional benevolent, kind-hearted advertisement of their own products. So now that we have looked at all these different Git desktop applications, let's try to look at how these applications fare when it comes to resolving merge conflicts. So I've already intentionally created a merge conflict from the master branch. We're currently within the develop branch, so let's try to merge the master branch into develop, which will definitely cause a merge conflict. And let's try to see how the conflict resolving interface looks like within these different desktop applications. The first stop we'll be looking at is source tree. So if we click on merge and try to merge master into it, you can see that this prompt appears to alert us of a potential merge conflict. And if we click on this thing, you can see that this is the local change that we have, and this is the change that is causing the conflict that is being pulled from the master branch. And the most immediate thing that I want to direct your attention to is that there's no syntax highlight within this area, which is a deal breaker to me. Right off the bat, this is unacceptable. If we want to resolve this conflict, we'll need to go to actions, resolve conflicts. This is very simple. You can either choose resolving using mine, which is replacing this conflicted area with the head, or resolving using theirs, which is these areas that is being pulled from the master. Or I guess you can try to launch a external merge tool. Again, right off the bat, there's no syntax highlighting. So guys, I just don't recommend you to use source tree to try to resolve your merge conflicts. That's it. Now let's try to look at how other applications are doing it. Let's try to look at Sublime Merge. So let's try first to abort the merge, right? And then when we go to the branches and try to merge master into develop, and we will have a merge conflict. This is marginally better than the source tree because at least we have syntax highlight. And if we click on resolve, we get this difference editor, which is kind of not powerful enough in my personal opinion. You can try to use this bottom bar to look at files that are longer because it doesn't allow you to do a soft wrap. And you can use this little icons to move things to your merged potential output. We can undo it and try to click on this thing to use the code that is from the head, and the potential merged output will be updated for us to examine. And you'll see that this user interface is very similar to how Webstorm, or I would imagine all JetBrains IDEs, are implementing their Git merge conflict resolving interface, which is not something that I potentially personally like. Now let's try to cancel it and look at how GitKraken implemented their conflict resolving interface. Let's try to merge the master branch into our current develop branch. Let's try to right click master and merge master into develop. Again, immediately we get a merge failed, and we can see that we have a conflicted file. And if we click on it, this is so much better looking and so much more intuitive than anything that we have seen so far. You have your different sources split into two different editors, and this is your output, and you can either use the select all or use the little different plus minus. So imagine if instead of one line you have a long multi-lined difference, you can use this little plus icon to move the desired lines into your output area, and you can toggle on and off and move it back and forth. Guys, I just personally love how GitKraken is implementing anything that is Git related. And by far, I would say that when it comes to standalone Git client that you would like to use to resolve your Git conflicts, this is the best interface in my personal opinion. So let's try to cancel out and look at how GitHub Desktop is implementing it. Okay, let's abort merge. The first thing we want to do is to try to merge the master branch into develop. And I have to say, the official GitHub desktop application, the userface is very unintuitive. For the longest time, I didn't even know how I was supposed to merge, a different branch into the working branch. I guess we have to do it from here. Choose a branch to merge into develop. Yep. And now let's try to merge master into it. And we get this prompt saying that we have a merge conflict. And you can see that the desktop application of GitHub doesn't allow you to resolve the conflict within the same application. You have to rely on external editors to resolve your conflicts. Your option is to open an atom. I guess this part is configurable. So let's say that you don't have atom installed, or your external editor of choice is VS Code. I guess you can configure this application to use that instead. But for the sake of demonstration, let's open up the conflicted files in Atom to see how it was implemented. And credits where credits are due, I would say that this interface is very nice looking and very intuitive to work with. And long story short, the same user interface is being extended into VS Code. There are a couple of different things that I do not necessarily like about how Atom is implementing this Git conflict resolving interface. I don't like this label. Our changes, common ancestor, their changes, these labels aren't very intuitive to me either. So if you prefer this kind of user interface, rest assured that you can get the same result and better if you're using VS Code. So that's how GitHub desktop application is implementing their merge conflict resolving functionality, which again, I cannot recommend in good conscience. So long story short, just don't use this application ever. And the last stop is Git Ahead. To be honest, I don't like this application, but let's try to see how they're implementing their thing. How do I merge master into it? Merge into develop. Right, we have a conflict over here. Again, right off the bat, no syntax highlighting, unacceptable. You can click on different colors to either choose the incoming changes or the outgoing changes. What does this editing do? It opens up a new panel, which is also not syntax highlighted. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with it. I guess you're supposed to delete the unwanted part of your code. Let's just not use this software for resolving Git conflict at all. So now that we have seen how different desktop Git clients implement their functionality of resolving Git conflicts, again, let's just say a few words about these desktop applications. Sublime Merge, the pricing is a little bit pricey. I think it's a one-time fee of $99 US. It's cross-platform. You can use it on all the major different operating systems. Insanely powerful, very intuitive user interface. I would say that this one would meet most of your Git operation needs, and I guess the pricing is affordable. So Sublime Merge, the pricing of the software is a one-time fee of $99 US. However, I would like to also point out that the so-called one-time fee, it doesn't grant you a permanent license. It just gets you a free update within 3 years. So after 3 years, if they decided to release a Sublime Merge version 2, then you would have to pay for a license for that updated version again. One thing that would definitely make me personally recommend Sublime Merge to somebody is that if you're an existing user of Sublime Text who uses Sublime Text as your day-to-day daily driver of your code editor, then definitely check out Sublime Merge and even consider purchasing it, because the integration between the two pieces of software is excellent, because at the end of the day, they're made by the same group of people. So you can open up Sublime Merge within your Sublime Text editor, and vice versa in Sublime Merge. If you want to resolve conflict using a external text editor, the integration between the two is excellent. Now, if we take a look at the Git Kraken pricing for paid license, you can see that the Pro version offers way more different features than Sublime Merge. And some of the features I would even venture to say that are not called for or necessary for independent developers or developers working in smaller teams. In my opinion, Git Flow is just a branch naming convention or a workflow convention so that you have your master branch, and most of the time you'll be working on your develop branch. This is the branch that is more prone to breaking, less stable than the master branch. And whenever you're implementing a feature, you do feature slash and you just constantly merge your feature branch into a develop. I would say that this is a workflow that isn't universally adopted. So if you're working with more senior programmers that aren't really influenced by the latest, the most in kind of workflow, this kind of support is not really necessary. And if you look at some additional features like the boards, they even implemented their own Kanban system, which is very nice. If you're just an independent developer who do not use Kanban system to track the flow of your project, it could be potentially a hard sell. But overall, I would say that the user interface, like we have said multiple times in this video, is just a joy to work with. I would say that the user interface of your tooling, of the software that you use on a daily basis, it plays a big part of how much joy you can derive from your day-to-day development process. So the TLDR version, the personal recommendation of mine would be Gitkraken if you have the extra cash to spare, because this thing, the pro license for this software is $49 US per year. So I would say that if your company is kind enough, is gracious enough to grant you the license for Gitkraken, definitely take advantage of it. If you have the extra money to cough up, definitely use Gitkraken as your daily Git client. Otherwise, if you're a staunch Sublime Text user, consider purchasing a license for Sublime Merge. Otherwise, stick around. We're going to talk about the different version control systems that are built into the modern IDEs. Alright, the first piece of IDE that we'll be looking at is Webstorm. Webstorm is the tried and true IDE that I've been using as my daily driver for a long time, especially when it comes to Angular apps, because of the plethora of built-in support for a lot of the things like code intelligence, auto-completion, not just on the level of the language syntax, but also the different Angular modules, submodules, and all that good stuff. So let's try to look at how we would go about resolving a git merge conflict within Webstorm. So we would go to VCS, version control, git, and try to merge the master branch into the developed branch. So we would do that by merge master, and we'll say that this dialog pops up alerting us of a potential merge conflict. And when we clicked on merge, you can see that this diff editor interface is very, very similar to how Sublime Merge is implementing theirs. You have different editors that cannot be wrapped, and you have syntax highlight, and you will use this synchronized scrolling bar to look at a piece of longer code that is a very long line, and you can use these things to move things around to your potential output. Again, it gets the job done, but in my opinion, not the best solution that I would pick when it comes to resolving merge conflicts. So let's cancel it and go to Visual Studio Code. If we open the repository, you can see that there's a whole section on the sidebar that is dedicated specifically to the version control operations. And right off the bat, when we go to this the file staging area, you can see that the file in question that is causing the merge conflict warning, this interface is very similar to what we saw in Atom. You have your current change labeled in green and the incoming change labeled in blue. And you have these options to accept different outcomes. So you can either accept what is on the current head or what is being pulled from the being merged target. This is very nice. In my opinion, this is the ideal interface when it comes to resolving merge conflicts. So in my opinion, if you use Visual Studio Code as your daily driver for your IDE, then you can use a combination of the built-in version control and the terminal to do your day-to-day Git operations. And why do we need to involve the built-in terminal to this? Because although most of the Git commands are supported, if you go to the command palette and type in Git, you can do most of the things. Like if you want to add a tag, you can do Git tag. You can do most of the things that you would do with Git in your command palette, but some of the commands are not available there. For example, if we want to abort this merge, we don't see that option from the command. However, that's where the built-in terminal comes in. We can always just go to the terminal and do git merge -- abort. Then this merge conflict will go away. And like we said before, by combining the version control panel, the command palette, and the built-in terminal, as a heavy Visual Studio user, you can completely do away with any need for a Git client, and while still satisfying all of your Git operations. Alright guys, so that's all I have to say in today's video. Just as a innocuous reminder or a disclaimer, this video is not sponsored by any of the software we have discussed in the video. It's purely based on my personal opinion. If you like what you have seen in this video, please comment, like, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see all of you in next week's video. Bye bye.